Thank you very much for being here this morning. And first of all, I want to thank all of our friends, the Democrats in the Texas Legislature, for doing the right thing, coming to Washington, D.C. to really shine light on what's a very glaring topic, a very important topic in our country, and that's the eroding of voting rights. Since 1965, since the Voting Rights Act was passed in the mid-60s, we have not seen this level of retrogression in the right for people to cast their votes since that time period. And people need to do something about it. And this group is here today exactly doing that. They're doing something about it. They're standing up and they're doing the right thing. Congressman Doggett and I are very happy to host him here at the Triangle today. The first person that you're going to hear from is Chris Turner, who's the chair of the House Democratic Caucus in Austin. He represents Tarrant County, but we're happy to have all of these courageous members here today. They made big sacrifices to be here today. These members all come from a variety of different districts. Some of them come from, in D.C., what we would call frontline districts, and they're making a sacrifice so all Americans, regardless of their race, their income, their party affiliation, will have equal access to the ballot. And that is what this is about. Before I turn it over to Chris, would like for Congressman Doggett to also have a few words, and then the next person you hear from after Lloyd, Chris.
We'll wrap this up at the end, but clearly they brought the Texas heat along with the Texas courage. We're glad all of you are out. We are here to honor them and their courage. They're focused not just on what's happening in Texas, but what is happening right over there in the United States Senate. It is a time for bold action, the same kind of bold action and courage we need in the United States Senate and from this administration that these Texas colleagues of ours are demonstrating by their action. Chris, we're so pleased you're here. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Congressman Vesey, Congressman Doggett, and our entire Texas congressional delegation. All of whom just do such a fabulous job of representing the Lone Star State here in our nation's capital, fighting for the people of Texas every single day. We can't thank you enough. Thank you for hosting us here this morning. My name is Chris Turner. I am the chair of the Texas House Democratic Caucus. I'm the state representative from Grand Prairie, Texas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. As you just heard, more than 50 Democratic members of the Texas House have left Texas to stop Republicans from passing the latest iteration of their voter suppression legislation. And you're going to hear primarily from some of my colleagues today because we have so many strong voices in our caucus. We want to give them the opportunity to speak to the public. But just for everyone's awareness, procedurally how this works is there's 150 members of the Texas House. It takes 2/3 of the body present to constitute a quorum, so 100 members. And we vote in Texas, and we register our attendance by use of voting machines on our day. And minutes ago, at least 57 letters were delivered to the House Journal Clerk directing the House to lock our voting machines and not unlock them until we provide express permission to do so on our return. So, with that, it's my privilege now to introduce a great fighter, a longtime advocate in the fight for voting rights, my good friend, the chairman of the Mexican-American Legislative Caucus in Dallas, Texas, Rafael Archie.
Para los medios de comunicación de habla
hispana. Oh, en español. That's good.
En español al inicio para no solamente reiterar lo que dijo mi colega, el presidente del grupo de demócratas, Chris Turner, pero también para platicar directamente con el público. Este grupo de legisladores que representan cada rincón del estado de Texas.
Sorry, Mama, that I'm touching your hair. I just want to take pictures.
Para proteger el derecho de voto de todos tejanos. No importa si eres hispano, afroamericano, anglosajón, republicano, demócrata, católico o protestante. Nosotros teníamos que salir para proteger el voto. El gobernador Abbott ha intentado desarrollar una agenda antimigrante, antihispana, antidemocrática. Y empezó por quitar el dinero para la Cámara de Diputados y el Senado. Vetar el dinero que viene para la rama legislativa, que es algo que se ve en otros países, pero en los Estados Unidos no se ve. Es decir, un gobernador no se puede convertir en un rey. Él tiene que respetar las cortes, tiene que respetar la rama legislativa. Y no lo ha hecho. Así es que al inicio de esta sesión legislativa empezó mal, empezó envenenado, y nosotros no íbamos a participar en ese proceso antidemocrático. So I also speak English, and I will offer you a few words as the chair of the Mexican American Legislative Caucus. My name is Rafael Lanchia. I represent Dallas, and I have the honor of representing the 40-plus members of the oldest and largest Latino legislative caucus in America, which is the Mexican American Legislative Caucus. And you will see prominent members of our caucus standing with me today who have fought for voting rights over the decades. I just want to offer that at the outset of this legislative session, the process was poisoned. And it was poisoned by a governor who defunded the legislative branch in violation of both our state constitution, which has very specific language about separation of powers, and also what has been developed under the jurisprudence of our U.S. Constitution. When you start the process in such a coercive way, when you say, I am going to be the absolute ruler of the state of Texas and defund the legislative branch, you have poisoned the entire process. And we, as Democrats, we were united. We said we are going to kill any undemocratic efforts in the state legislature. And if that meant leaving the state, we were going to do it. Now, you have probably looked long and hard at the legislation that has been offered just in recent times. Legislation that would make it harder for Texans to exercise their freedom of vote and their right to vote. And we're not doing this for Democrats. We're doing this for Republicans. We're doing this for independents. We're doing this for North Texans and South Texans and East and West Texans. We're doing this for Catholics and Protestants. Anybody in the state of Texas who needs to exercise the right to vote should do so freely. And we are not going to buckle to the big lie in the state of Texas. The big lie that has resulted in anti-democratic legislation throughout the United States. We said no when the big lie came to the Capitol in Texas and darkened our door. We said no during the regular session, and we are saying no during the regular session. We are happy to work on bipartisan proposals that expand the right to vote, that make it easier to vote and harder to cheat in the state of Texas. But that is not what we saw even at the outset of this process, when none of the amendments offered by my colleagues were considered in committee. So we said, and we took a very difficult decision. We are not here smiling. We are not spiking the ball. We are not saying that we are happy. In fact, we are sad for democracy in the state of Texas. And we took a solemn oath to protect the Constitution of the United States and to protect the Constitution of the state of Texas. And that is why we stand united before you here today in preserving not only the democracy in Texas, but the democracy of the United States. Thank you for your time. And next, I'd like to, if she has arrived, call up the chair, the vice chair rather, of the House Democratic Caucus, Tony Rose. And in her absence, I would then like to call Representative Retta Bowers, my colleague from Dallas County. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Anchia, and thank you for all for being here today. I used to live here in Washington, and I worked like you for press, for PBS, and WTVA, and it is a proud, pleasing to know that here with my colleagues as a member of the Texas House. We are here in D.C., our nation's capital, because we want to protect the civil right to vote for millions of Texans. We were quite literally forced to move and leave the state of Texas. We also know that we are living right now on borrowed time in Texas. And we can't stay here indefinitely to run out the clock, to stop Republican anti-voter we need Congress to act now. At this time, Chairman Turner.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Bowers, on behalf of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus and Chairman Chia, Texas Legislative Caucus. Let me now hand it back over to our congressional leaders, Congressman Beasley. I know everyone familiar with Capitol Hill knows their security protocols, so we had a couple members get up. Representative Tony Rose is approaching. Tony is a representative from Dallas. She serves as the first vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus, and she's our dear friend and leader in our caucus. I invite her up to speak here. Representative Tony Rose.
Thank you. You know, Republicans have failed Texas. Texas Republicans don't want free and fair elections. House Bill 3 puts deliberate barriers to voting to make it hard for Texas to cast just a free, safe, and equally vote. House Bill 3 is an attack on voters' freedoms and democracy. Even with two ruthless provisions removed, the bill, as written, makes it harder for Texans to vote and easier for partisan poll watchers to harass and intimidate voters. Greg Abbott wants the spotlight anywhere but on his face, rigging the system, attacking the very foundation of democracy and the rights of all Texans in the price of the GOP-led legislature. It's the price they're willing to pay in order to pay for Trump's prayer altar. So we have real issues to address in Texas that Greg Abbott won't touch because it exposes his weaknesses. He has done nothing to protect the electric grid, even after 700 people died due to his negligence during the recent winter storm. But Democrats, we stand ready at all times to work on real issues. Thank you.
Before we hear from our congressional members again, it's my honor to introduce the team of the Texas House Democratic Caucus. Representative Victoria Thompson.
I'm going to tell you why I'm up here. I'm not up here to take a vacation in Washington, D.C. When I look at the African American Museum, I thought about the struggle that my people fought in this country to get the right to vote. Yeah. And that right is sacred to my constituent that I represent back in Houston, Texas. And I'm up here because I don't plan to be a sitting person in that legislature. I'm not going to be a sitting. I'm not going to be a hostage. That my voters, my constituents, right to be stripped from them. We have fought too long and too hard in this country. And there was a Texan called Johnson, President Lyndon B. Johnson, August the 6th of 1965. They made sure that we had the right to vote. That's right. And those rights was not going to be infringed upon. But this legislature may have, these Republicans in this legislature may have changed the Messiah, Jesus, to Trump, but I haven't. And I'm going to make sure everything that I can do, that my constituents' right will not be stripped from them because of what they believe in is a lie. Trump lost the election.
Yes, he did.
And they need to tell the people of this country the truth.
Yeah.
And if they won't, I'm going to.
Let me hand it back to our members of Congress with the caveat that's going to be a difficult act to follow. With all due respect to Congressman Beasley and Congressman Douglas.
Chris, thank you very much. Ms. Thompson, thank you very much. And you know, when I think about Ms. Thompson, she didn't really tell you her entire story. We served in the state legislature together. And when she was elected to the state legislature, it was really right after all of the civil rights bills in the 1960s were passed. Shortly thereafter, when state legislators still had to be elected countywide, where we were just getting rid of poll taxes and the barriers that made it harder for people to vote. And it's a shame that today, in 2021, that we are revisiting the past. And that's exactly what we're doing. If they tell you otherwise, and they're like, oh, that's nothing, anybody can do that, that's not that big of a deal, it is. And they wouldn't be doing this if they didn't think it would have a negative outcome on particularly brown and black voters in the state of Texas and in the other states that are doing similar style legislation. That's why as a member of Congress, I founded the Congressional Voting Rights Caucus. Because you can see these things for the last 10, 15, 20 years starting to rear its ugly head again. And, you know, with that, I want to be 100% clear. Now, not later, not sometime in the future, now, we need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It needs to be signed into law, and we also need to pass H.R. 1. Our citizens can't wait any longer. And I want to echo what our majority whip here in the U.S. House, Jim Clyburn, talked about when he mentioned a carve-out for H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. If Mitch McConnell did a carve-out for Amy Coney Barrett, then we ought to do a carve-out for the black and brown people that live in Texas and that live in Georgia, that live in Florida, that live in all these states that are trying to make it harder for our constituents to exercise their right to vote. We need to get this done today. Time is of the essence. We cannot wait. States are going to start to ramp up these efforts. We're, again, Texas has called, Governor Abbott has called the legislature back into session to start working on these things. You're going to see the most racist redistricting that you've seen since the Voting Rights Act outlawed things like at-large districts. And we need something to help protect the brave men and women that you see standing behind me here today that are risking so much for voting rights in this country. And before I turn it over to Congressman Doggett, I just want Greg Abbott and Republican leaders in Texas, Florida, Georgia, and anywhere else to know that we are not going to stop. We are always going to push back against these sort of bigoted, racist, Jim Crow 2.0 style voting laws whenever you decide to bring them up. Congressman Doggett.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chris, and all of you who have spoken. You know, most of the focus around here these days is about infrastructure. And it's right that we should focus on crumbling bridges. But today we're here about something much more important, and that is the infrastructure of democracy, about broken voting rights. These courageous colleagues chose not to be accomplices by sitting at their desk with being steamrollered in Austin. It took courage to do what they're doing. I served also with Dean Synfronio Thompson at a time I was a killer bee when 12 of us chose to depart and won a victory on an issue involving election integrity. They have a much bigger challenge because unlike the position we were in decades ago, no matter what they do, Greg Abbott and his group of extremists will never change. What can change is right here in this building. And as Dean Thompson mentioned, what we really need today is a Lyndon Johnson moment. Yes. We need the power of the presidency. A great outline in an op-ed in yesterday's Post about other things President Biden can do. We need the president and the vice president and every Democrat in this Senate working together to preserve American democracy. There has seldom been more at stake. That's why they're here. We need to see in the administration and in the Senate the same courage that these Texans have demonstrated. That Lyndon Johnson moment. Remember how difficult it was to pass over so much objection to Voting Rights Act in 1965. When we gathered, Chris, there in Austin, Lucy Baines Johnson was one of our most powerful speakers, telling about standing at the desk when President Johnson signed that Voting Rights Act. We want to be standing there when a new Voting Rights Act for this century is there, and the rights that struggled, so many lives were taken, so much courage was demonstrated, are preserved once again. I turn it back over to you for the questions, and thank you very much for all that you and all of your colleagues are doing here today.
We will overcome. We We will overcome. We will overcome someday. Deep in our heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Thank you, members of Congress. We'll take a few questions. Chris.
You guys, a number of y'all were here a few weeks ago lobbying members of Congress to act on any of these federal voting rights legislation. The bill still didn't pass muster in the Senate. What'll be different this time?
Sure. Well, democracy's hard, and we don't expect anything up here to be easy. But look, we had productive meetings a few weeks ago. Many of us were here. We brought some reinforcements this time, and look, after we were here, you saw all 50 Democrats in the U.S. Senate coalesce behind a version of H.R. 1. That was I'm not taking credit for that necessarily, but progress was made. Okay, and I think those discussions we had helped inform that discussion. And so now, as Congressman Doggett just said, we really want to drill down on the importance of Democratic leader Clyburn's comments about a carve-out on the filibuster with respect to voting rights. I mean, if we can't, if the executive instruction BC just said if you can have a carve-out for a right-wing Supreme Court justice, why can't you have a carve-out to protect the very fundamentals of democracy?
The legislation ends on August 7th. The current has already said that, or essentially made it clear that even if that event ends up expiring, he's just going to call another session. So are you going to keep on doing this over and over and over again?
Yeah, we know that's exactly what he's going to do. We went into this eyes wide open. We know exactly what will happen. Rick Perry did the same thing many years ago in another similar situation. So what our message is very simple. Like Chairman Archie said a minute ago, our intent is to stay out and kill this bill this session and use the intervening time, I think 24, 25 days now, before the end of this session, to implore the folks in this building behind us to pass federal voting rights legislation to protect voters in Texas as well. Oh, with respect to Republicans also? Well, the first thing that needs to happen is stand down and we can talk about that a lot this morning, but this caucus is pursuing action with the Texas Supreme Court because we believe what the things unconstitutional. The first place to start was with the governor to stand down on that, and then we can start talking.
Your home state Senator Senator Cornyn called this nothing but a publicity stunt. What do you say to him and others?
John Cornyn said this is a publicity stunt. Well, I hadn't seen that, but I think our two U.S. senators wrote the book on publicity stunts. And what I would say to Senator Cornyn is we'd encourage him to work in a bipartisan manner as people in Texas elected to pass voting rights legislation to protect 30 million Texans. Says he represents. Last question.
Chris, Congressman Doggett mentioned an LBJ moment from the White House. Are you happy with the amount that you've seen President Biden and Vice President Harris pushing on this, or do you think there's more that they can do?
Look, a number of us had the privilege of having a very good meeting with Vice President Harris a few weeks ago, where she thanked all the Democrats in the Texas House and Senate for our strong stand against the Republican vote suppression effort, and reiterated her commitment to the President's commitment to continue to do all they could. We're looking forward to seeing what the President says today in his speech on voting rights in Philadelphia, and we hope what we'll hear is an even stronger commitment and a clear plan of action as to how we can break the gridlock in the Senate and pass federal legislation immediately this summer. We have a short window here. As previously mentioned, this session ends on August 7th, and we can't hold this tied back forever. We're buying some time. We need Congress and all of our federal leaders to use that time wisely.
Is there more they can do than they've been doing?